I'm Nicholas Phillips. On today's episode, Professor Dave Sherwyn from the School of Hotel Administration is discussing leveraging AI to operate the hotels of the future with the founder and CEO of Mogul Hotels and Residences, Alexander Mirza. Alexander is joining us as he prepares for the release of his book, Talent Disruption, People Are the Brand. Dave, Alex, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Nick, thank you for the introduction. Thanks to Cornell for having us, and thanks to everybody who is out there watching this webinar. We appreciate you giving us your time. Alex, thank you for coming all the way out to Ithaca. I know it's not easy to get here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What the audience would not know, but you and I met several years ago. We met at the center that I run, the Cornell Center for Innovative Hospitality, Labor and Employment Relations, the world's longest title. Kyler, we were at our annual HR and Hospitality Conference at the Del Coronado in San Diego. Shameless plug, this year's conference is in Atlanta, April 29th through May 1st. But anyway, when I met you at the Del, we came in, you were at the conference, you were participating, and right away I realized you weren't really an HR guy. So here you were at the HR conference presenting, but not as a true HR person. So Alex, who are you?
Yeah, I'm a strategist, intrapreneur turned entrepreneur. And I paid my dues at big hotel chains and brands. I ran functions like strategy, corporate dev, and then went on to be a boutique hotel CEO. All of which was accidental. I had no idea I'd be in this business or certainly working on HR issues. And now my former colleagues make fun of me and say, what happened to you? You became an HR guy?
So yes, becoming an HR guy and being made fun of, I understand that. It happens a lot. And we spend a lot of time with the finance people, the development people, as the hotel industry has become much of a real estate play. It seems real estate folks are really running the show in many ways, and then we've got your traditional operators. And when we started our conference, I'd say the first 5 years, our conference, this will be our 18th year, was always about how does HR get a seat at the table? Well, that's not really the issue anymore. HR has a seat at the table,
right.
But the next question is, how do we convince people that at the end of the day, the driver in your business can be HR? And it seems that that's what you identified. You wrote a book about it, and it is the basis of your hotel company. So give us some understanding of how a strategist became, focused on human capital.
Yeah, so, probably the formative experience in my career was I got a chance to work for Professor Gary Lubman, who was chairman and CEO of Caesars. And, he had, over the course of a decade, put a system in place in the company that where the primary, objective was to allocate capital to talent and to service profit chain through employee development and training, financial literacy, as well as bonuses and profit sharing. And, that sounds all great. Theoretically, as it did when he taught it at business school. But when you get inside the company and you see that it's outperforming its peers by 10, 15% or more in margins, and there are, in the midst of inferior assets, worse products, and, perhaps less prestigious hospitality, at the time, it blew me away. It was very impressive. So as I dug into that and I looked at it more and more, I saw that, he really was focused on differentiating and winning on service. And it proved to me that you could do that if you invested in people and build a culture around it.
So, first of all, I love the fact that you referenced Gary Lubman coming from Harvard to take over as a CEO, proving that a professor can actually do something, as opposed to just
right.
pretend and talk about it. So that's a pretty cool thing to talk about, Gary Lubman. You say that what he did in the gaming, in the sort of casino resort world was so innovative and it blew you away. And now you look at what others do or don't do. So your book is filled with solutions in many ways. But the beginning that I want to, for us in the audience, where's the problem?
Yeah,
What's the problem with what people are doing now with their priorities in general and towards human capital specifically?
Right. So, I mean, as we've seen in the last several months, it's certainly not just an issue for the hotel industry or hospitality, right? It cuts across all services, and we're seeing that with the labor strife and many of the issues facing industries from healthcare to the auto industry and others. But I think, the title of the book is Talent Disruption, and we define talent disruption as, 20 to 30% increase in your unit labor costs over a very short period of time, say 18 to 24 months on one dimension, and the other one is loss of quality of talent. You look at the hotel industry, it's down about 20% in terms of its quality of talent, elite talent, GM-ready level
so wait
talent.
a second. So when you say that, you're saying I have 100 employees. You're not saying I have 80. You're saying I still might have 100, but if on a scale of 1 to 5 they were averaging a 4, they're now down 20% off of that.
Correct. And even perhaps more damaging is that those who could have been a GM or leaders of the future have defected and left for other industries or left the workforce altogether. And so I think that that's a condition of certain industries. The hotel industry is one of them. Healthcare is another one.
So let me jump in again, because
Sure.
Through the pandemic and as a hotel school professor, as I saw the exodus from the industry and thinking, wait, I love this industry, and I've been sending my students there since 1997. Part of what the runaway was how recession sensitive and how disruptible the industry was. With healthcare, just how hard it was. Are there things that I'm missing? What is it? What caused the exodus? I think that we as a society got addicted to cheap goods and services and cheap providers of goods and services. So it was our demand that the providers be so underpaid, or was it the natures of the jobs themselves or the industry?
I think it's the industry. I think the first thing you have to look at, and I'm an MBA, is you got to look at the industry structure. What happened? What changed? Okay, so over the course of the last 15 years, right, we've gone from hotels owned, I think, 12% by private equity to 70% in the U.S. We've gone from brands managing at least a third or half of their operations to under 5%. And the emergence of third-party management companies, many of whom did not have scale or systems or structure in place. So simply, in terms of who people are working for, it's different. In terms of what those companies have, in terms of their investment in people and systems and process, it's not at the level that it was before when chains and brands ran those operations. In terms of the assets, you're talking about a situation in which, hotels trade every 5.5 years. So it's a trading business, more of a trading business, right? Less of an institutional, longer hold business. So all these things, I think, from an industry structure perspective, make it challenging for someone to be on point for human capital. There's owners, there's operators, there's brands and lenders, and so many people. And secondly, it makes it very difficult for people to see a career path.
So I want to discuss that, because I think that the structure of the industry is something that's vital, and it's what is a driver to what you've done. That an industry that didn't have issues wouldn't have been so easy to identify and show. Right. And I think that we could probably talk for 3 or 4 hours about how the structure is kind of funky and how it leads to issues. But if we start, that will never end. So I want to take you back a little bit and say we saw that we have a problem with talent. That there's an exodus of talent. There's a shortage of bodies,
right,
because most hotels are understaffed. And you're saying within that shortage of bodies per person, we have a shortage of talent, which is, if we had fewer people but more talented, we might be able to live. Fewer people who are less talented, that's a problem. And my gut would tell me it starts with hiring, But I think you're going to tell me it starts with identifying talent before you're even looking to hire. So how do we begin to, in your book and in your mind, how do you begin to solve this problem?
Yeah. So look, I mean, we start by applying the same data, logic and analytics that we apply to revenue management or financial feasibility to human capital. We've got to measure it. Every hotel needs to know the value of its human capital. Every hotel operator and company needs to know that value. It's on the balance sheet. It's an intangible. When you do your pro forma and your financials and you say you're going to improve that property by this much, you're really assuming a lot about the operators and how they're going to perform or outperform others. You're going to bring in some great GM and great salesperson and so forth, right? That's math. That is not being measured, reported, and looked at every day alongside financial and customer data. We've got to change that culture, and that's got to be right there on that scorecard, data we're looking at. Okay, now when you get into...
I'm sorry, because I just interrupt you because I'm trying to wrap my arms around it. Who are you measuring? Like you'll say we bring in a great GM,
Yeah.
and you and I know the hotel structure varies greatly between the resort, the integrated casino resort, which might as well be a city with 10,000 employees, and a franchise select service hotel that might have 30 employees. So when you're saying, I want to do this scorecard, obviously the GM is going to be scored down to the room attendant, the dishwasher.
Just like we do for the customer, we do it down to the department level, right?
Okay.
So you can look at a customer scorecard. You don't just see F&B, you see banquet, catering, you see room service, you see restaurants. You can see each restaurant venue, at least down to that level, supervisor and above department level. I think that's where we should start. So what I think is missing before you get to the solution, right, is that there really isn't a meritocracy or system here where the best people get paid for the value they create and the best talent rises and gets promoted based on their potential and their leadership abilities. And that sounds like, why? What are you talking about? We do that. but
well,
we have
I'll go the other way.
Yeah.
We attempt to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, I started this by sort of goofing on you, saying like you were at an HR conference and you're not really an HR person. And I'm a labor and employment lawyer, so I'm an HR poser also. So I'm right with you. And I have listened to HR people for decades as we attempt to measure, as we attempt to identify. So it's not like folks didn't try. The question is, I think they didn't succeed.
Well, think about it this way. When you're figuring out what to pay your GM, you're doing it. You're saying that this is what this person's worth. And when you pay their bonus, you're saying this is the value they're adding. But when an asset's refinanced, they don't get a portion of that. They don't own shares in the hotel. And neither does anyone on the hotel management team, right? And at least that I've seen, although very recently some interesting things are being done by some great private equity firms around that. But I think they're just scratching the surface, right? So like alignment of interests and driving that sense of ownership, and then potentially, it could be an alternative form of governance to unions. That, when employees have a seat at the table beside the owners and the brand, that with an equal voice and an ownership in the asset, the game changes.
And when you say from a union standpoint, what you're saying is, I think, that if I own the place, I'm less likely to believe I need a union because I've got a more direct voice instead of having a negotiator for me for a contract defining what I do. Instead, I'm kind of part of the management team figuring out what we should do.
Exactly. I mean, and right now we're not really providing an alternative. And, as a consequence, I think unionization is growing, not just across our industry, but others. But now you're seeing even boutique hotels where unions are going after them. And I think that all of that is a failure of management. It's a failure of our imagination. And it's a failure of innovation on our part to really empower the workforce and to align interests. Look, it's not always going to work out beautifully. If a hotel's losing money or has a down cycle, then they're not going to get any profit sharing, or there might be, a negative bank that they got to earn back against. just like if you're an owner. But I think that what the problem is that when you have ratios of 400 to 1 from CEO to the front line or greater, people know about it. They're angry. The unions get them worked up about it. And increasing their pay once or twice is not going to solve this.
And when you look at what happened in the pandemic when they all lost their jobs and owners and high-level people worked remote and still had their jobs, the union sounds like somebody to go to that fights for your health insurance and so on,
right,
as opposed to, again, and I remember being with an operator, and person said, they were on the phone and they kind of gave me that 1 minute sign and then whispered, I'm fighting with an owner to keep the health insurance going. And that's, so if the employees are at that table, maybe that fight doesn't exist. But let's go back to, again, you said that you want to score and identify talent and say, have some sort of something that I can wrap my arms around so that I can discern what talent is and who possesses it. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think we have the data to do that, right? And that's a beautiful thing about AI when we get to it, is it just makes it scalable. But this is a business with a lot of smart people who are using data and analytics from multiple sources and feeds to figure out, how a property is performing, or how a piece of real estate is performing, or when to invest in it, or when to improve it and where and all that. I think it's just taking a lot of that data and then drilling it down and applying it to these departments and individual teams and employees. You're looking at customer satisfaction, changes in it, indexing it. You're looking at quality of the product and brand experience. We're looking at and adjusting it for the degree of difficulty. How hard is it in that particular place and time to beat other people and outperform them when you have a lot of competition or tremendous demand in the market, adjusting for those factors. It's an algorithm, and it's testing these algorithms with multiple data feeds, applying them to teams and talent, ranking the talent, putting those talents into talent tiers, which, guess what? All the gig apps do it. If you go on Upwork or TaskRabbit or even Uber, you're going to see talent ranked in tiers based on reviews and paid differently.
And you're having dived into this data, and looking at it. I used to, when Yelp and TripAdvisor came out, and I was so on top of the game when people said, "What do you think?" I said, "Why would I trust anybody who spends their time giving reviews?" Shows how much I knew. But are you comfortable that those reviews provide you with meaningful data as long as you have enough of them?
Yes, and let's just use the reviews we're already using on the customer side and map them to people and departments and then index them for a starter, right? And we know the comp sets from STR and other things, and it's the same thing that's happening in other industries. So I think that's the core thing. All of that creates some kind of a talent marketplace, some kind of a meritocracy, right? Where today it takes an average of 14 years to be a GM in a luxury hotel,
Well, I know I laugh because my friend Ed Evans was the CHRO at Four Seasons, and he had a similar statistic, and then he compared it to what it took to take a rocket into space at NASA, and it was like 6 years. He's like, so in 6 years you can fly into space, but it takes 14 years to be like the director of housekeeping. And so, yes, we have to get people to a place quicker. But, okay, so you say, I've identified talent. And in some ways, it seems that the identification of the talent is linked to the property. So this person in this department at this successful property, based on the reviews and so on. So now I'm searching to hire people. How do I go about learning that the GM I want or the assistant director of housekeeping should be my director of housekeeping? How do I turn that into a hire for my company?
Yeah, the first thing you have to do is look within the company. Okay, and so this marketplace has to first exist inside, and you have to really max that out. And that's where I think the retention comes in, and profit sharing and alignment. But, GM ready talent exists often 2 levels below, the GM. And using data and indicators to, be notified of who those talents are and when they may be ready, or who's a rising star based on the data, not based on 1 or 2 people's opinion inside the company, right? Moving them up faster, moving them around into those roles.
So you're talking now more about, again, having a company with some scale.
Yeah.
This doesn't work when you have 3 hotels.
It can work if you have 3 hotels, if you are in a network. And this is where I think we need to go, right?
So let me take it back. So one, if I'm a Hilton, Marriott, of course, I'm a very large operator, then I can hang with my own company. But if I'm with 3 hotels, I'm a small franchisee or something like that.
Right.
You're saying that I need to make friends with my competitors.
Yeah. If you're in that boat, okay, you got 2 options. Number 1, you got to make friends with your competitors, and we need to help such operators establish networks and where people are pooled and shared. And it's possible for one operator with 3 hotels who needs a GM, and for another one with 3 hotels who may have an extra GM. It's like a trade, okay? And we've set up a marketplace where that occurs. And there's even some kind of backfill or reward for that referral, okay? So I think it's
my job to interrupt you, I think. Or if it's not, I keep doing it.
Right.
And just to hammer the point home, because I am a lawyer, is that there are numerous franchisors that, as part of their franchise agreement, have no poaching agreements, which states and the federal government have come down against, that they didn't want this Burger King franchisee to take an assistant general manager from that one. And you're going radical here and saying, instead of trying to keep your people when you don't have an opportunity for them, to let them excel somewhere else for one of your competitors, and then take one of your competitors' assistant GMs or whatever the position is, and move up, and everyone's better off. And tell me if I got that right.
You got that right. And not just within our industry. If you look, for example, one of the clients we worked with in our software company was in the economy segment, right? And most of their employees come from construction and retail and other industries, right? So it's developing. This is just the way we solved the customer issue when we faced off against Expedia for the first time in OTAs. We had to launch reward programs. We had to develop databases of customers and market to them and CRM. The equivalent needs to happen with respect to human capital, and there are a lot of different ways to do it. But I think the most obvious way is to build these networks first with franchisees on a geographic basis, and then expand it outward from there to other industries where that talent resides, and for transactions and deals to occur, just like they do on gig economy apps.
So your concept is having accepted measures of who is talented, of successful employees that can bring their level of talent and hopefully their success to your property, and that a whole rising tide, all boats thing, that if we all do this together, that what we can do is we can facilitate the growth of the employees, which raises everybody up, instead of hoarding our employees, which ends up having them leave, which, sort of, for lack of a better term, dumbs down the industry.
Right. And I think, when you've got 5 out of 6 people working for third-party management companies, and very few people really know even who they work for, and those companies don't have infrastructure, I think that's a viable option, is to build a network in a community like that. So it's something that other industries have done, and like I said, it goes beyond that. When you ask me, okay, what could that person do who owns 3 hotels, right? Or operates 3 hotels? The other option is they can build a database themselves. They can go buy a database, they can go and piece it together and find all the construction workers, for example, who they could target in their local community, right? Which is the same thing they would do if they're looking for customers.
So we got a question from the audience, and it's a question that I'm going to take and then kind of cut left with it a little bit and take a different topic. But I really
Sure.
like the question. And Jose Medina says, what measures has the hospitality industry taken to mitigate or compete with alternatives such as Airbnb? And I'm going to use that question as a segue as to, in your book and in our conversations, you've said that you could reduce the using AI, you could reduce the number of employees at a full-service hotel significantly. And to Jose's question, that would mitigate some of the costs because Airbnb doesn't have employees. But then the question is, does your hotel become an Airbnb? Or does your hotel come, as our friend D. Taylor, the president of Unite here, always says, is you're going to turn into the airlines. So you've talked about AI as a way to reduce employee headcount. We have two examples of an industry, airlines, that lost the hospitality in a way. And then we have Airbnb, which didn't even try. They just say, here, stay here. And so you're going to reduce the headcount, and what are you going to do? Are we going to be the airlines? Are we going to be Airbnb? Or are we still going to be the hotel industry?
Okay, we had a 1 million unfilled positions in hotels in the U.S. in 2019 before the pandemic. Okay, and I think we're north of that right now. So I think clearly there's something wrong, right? People don't want to do these jobs. So why are we worried about automating some of them? You know, other industries don't have that reticence. So I think that I think it's critical that the first priority of AI be to give people tools and processes to automate much of their work and take away the administrative burden. In a hotel, just as it is, as we talk about in the book, it's occurring in hospitals and other industries. So if you do that, and you automate, say, talent acquisition or revenue management or accounting, you know, clearly, you know, you're not going to need as many people. Okay.
Okay, so that's back of the house stuff. Like revenue management gives me my price, gives me my rate. I'd like it to be lower. It really bothers me that I waited 2 days and now it's higher. So that doesn't make me happier that there's great revenue management. Certainly makes the brand or the owner happy.
Right.
Accounting, same thing. I never see the accountant until I need a copy of my folio. But when I talk about the hospitality aspect, because I can now check in on my phone is my key. I haven't talked to a human. Of course, my suitcase has rollers, so I'm not letting a bell person take it. And the concierge is now an app. So do I get everything I needed without talking to a person? And is that what we want?
I think for certain types of hotels, yes, you would get everything you needed. And I mean, let's give Airbnb some credit for one thing. They've taken a lot of hits lately. That superhost concept was probably their biggest innovation. Okay, and what is it? It's a talent tier of hosts ranked on reviews that's very hard to achieve, and it results in a revenue premium. The customers gave it, you know, attached value to it. And it even became a search variable at the beginning. So it was a huge success, right? So, and that's not something the hotel industry has embraced or executed, right? So start with that premise. And there are certain roles that could be virtual or automated or even replaced with robots and robotics, right? And so what that means is that you could go from 400 people running a 200-room hotel that's, you know, full service, all the way down to 50 or 60 people working in that. And those 50 or 60 are elite, phenomenal talents, right? And many of the other people who want to work in this business are working behind the scenes to create large language models and program them and update them to serve the customer. And the industry will be better off. The owners will be better off. People who are doing their jobs will enjoy doing them. They will be delivering service and, you know, innovation to the customer. And I think that that's a future where people will be excited about being in this industry.
So we've got a 400 employee hotel, and you just made it 50. It's got the same number of rooms. It's got the same F&B outlets. It's got a pool with towels and lounge chairs. And I get dropped off out of my Uber. Mm-hmm. How is my experience using AI different and as good or better with 50 people than 400? What can this provide me that extra, and what am I missing that I won't miss?
Right. If you think about what AI can do with all the data and knowledge that we would have about you on your trip when you show up, right? There's a lot of the process of your preferences and communicating the features of the hotel and taking you to your room and all that would be eliminated. The upgrade option, all that. So, if we can predict that in advance.
So what does that mean?
That means there's no front desk. That means there's no, departments of front office and bellman and concierge and all that stuff. There's just cross-functional 4 or 5 people. Then there's robots. And the robots are, checking you in, and your data is transmitted. And if you want, the robots can even give you feedback and suggestions. And we could take that to another level with all kinds of innovation on healthcare, on F&B, on your sleep and well-being. And that data could be tied into other networks.
So give me some examples on what you mean. So, when you think about robots, it's like I grew up in the 70s mostly, where we watched the Jetsons, and all the robots were just like mini humans. And then one of our students developed a robot that vacuums. It's not a human. It's like a disc. So when you're talking about robots checking me in, what am I? Is it a kiosk?
I'm talking about that being the next frontier of hospitality.
Okay.
Where hospitality experts are working alongside data scientists and software developers and coding these languages and these greetings and customizing it to the person. And so the level of personalization is greater, and the level of service is still at that level of warmth, and you still have humans in the building, okay? But what we know a lot more about you, and if you're willing to share that information, subject to, your privacy and what you're willing to do, we can customize that experience to a far greater extent.
Like what information and what will you do?
Okay, so let's take food and beverage, for example. Let's say you're a vegan and you're allergic to certain things, and we don't know it, okay? We will be able to get that information from you if you volunteer it. We'll be able to see what kind of food you're ordering on DoorDash or whatever app or some grocery store. And we might even be able to see what other challenges or issues you have with your health or otherwise, right? And so we'll take that all into account when we decide what room to put you in, when we decide maybe if you're at a resort, what your welcome drink is, what other amenities might go in the room, and so forth. And I think from there, that gives us a lot of opportunity to innovate and curate the experience to suit you. We might not know your DNA profile, but one day we'll know that too. I think we're really, where the magic is in the future with AI and hospitality is the intersection of traditional hospitality, well-being, healthcare, and fitness for people.
So are you, in some ways, are you sort of hospitality instead of the warm smile and the welcome? It's now I'm providing true needs that I'm saying to you, we're measuring sleep and we're measuring health and well-being, and we're taking your blood pressure or your heart rate when you come in and we know what you need. Are you talking about that level? I'm
talking about that level
detail?
for health and well-being, and I think you can also do that if you're at a resort and you just want to have fun and be indulgent. We can also turn that light on and help you chart those experiences without going through travel planners and concierges and all these websites and all that. So the whole process, if you just want to have fun, and and you're in the opposite kind of purpose for your trip, we can do that as well. So and I think that's only possible through AI, big data, and delivered partially through robotics.
And that manifests itself as I check in, you ask me some questions, or you've seen what I've done in the past, and you ask me quickly if this is business or leisure travel, and I say leisure, looking to have fun, and then you provide me with all kinds of options.
Yeah, and data mining, and you volunteering certain access to certain information, and for us to curate your experience or make it better.
Now, what tasks that humans do now? And we talked before that our friend Harry Katz, who's the former dean of the ILR school, has on numerous occasions called me a Luddite, as sort of this anti-tech person, and I'm not, or maybe I am. But where it always comes down to, and this is when I argue these things, is that many of the technological advances are replacing humans. I mean, we started with we're going to go from 400 to 50. So what are the areas, what are the tasks that AI can replace that won't bother me at all? Like, it's nice to see your room attendant, and it's nice to say hello and to be a nice person, but I can stay at a hotel for a week and never see my room attendant if I'm working and I leave before a person gets in, and when I get back, my room's clean.
Right.
So right. I could, if my room would be cleaned without a human, I don't think it would change my guest experience. So when you look at, and I don't know if you do this, do you look at, all right, these jobs, these interactions don't really add. So let's see if we can replace, and what are they? Which ones don't add and can be replaced?
I think they can all be replaced, which is a radical view perhaps right now. But, I think that all depends on the brand segment. And so in most of the industry, I think they can all be replaced. I think you still need a GM and a core team, standing behind, the automation and robotics. You said something else, though. You said, it's going to replace all these humans. And I think that that's wrong. I think it's more about training people in AI and retooling them. And this is something we're going to have to do, not just because of the labor shortage, because of immigration bottlenecks, and a whole range of other challenges. So imagine if you took the best concierges in the company and you said, we don't have a concierge function anymore, okay? But what we want you to do is work alongside these data scientists and these software developers and write the language, write your greeting, write your process, map the scenarios, and develop a large language model that can be executed. And guess what? It's a contest. We might actually call the humanoid or robot Mary or John, one of you. And if it works and we replicate it, you'll get royalties in that. And it will be just like what Hollywood just finished debating in terms of the rights to paying writers. That this is content creation. And the people standing behind it in wherever the concierge command and control room is are going to be keeping that alive and robust and continuing to make it better, and sometimes going out to the properties and auditing it and supporting it. That's the future. It doesn't mean they lose their jobs.
Well, but if we're talking about using AI and automation to clean rooms, now the housekeeping pool in the industry, oversimplification, has been newly arrived immigrants who don't speak English. Yep. And have been able to say, depending on the city, a arguably middle class or close to middle class job by being by themselves, cleaning a room where they don't need education or language skills. And it's a shift work, and you can be done in certainly 8 hours and maybe 6. It sounds like those jobs there's no place for that demographic. Now, maybe with our immigration bottleneck, there aren't people right now. No one can find people in that to do those tasks anyway.
Correct.
So maybe you're looking and saying, if that continues to dry up, there's no humans to fill in as people retire and move on. But we are saying that those jobs would go away.
Potentially.
And can be replaced by robots, kind of motored by AI.
Yes. Same as what's happening in other industries with automation. And you see Amazon automating warehouses, and there'll be some impact there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's more of a knowledge-based talent pool and more of a knowledge-based economy than a manual.
Correct.
Is how you're seeing it. So you're looking and saying a lot of the manual jobs that the industry is having trouble filling can be replaced by AI.
Yes.
And sort of cover the job shortage that way.
Right. And those 50 or 60 people still left in that full-service hotel have to be part owners. They have to be engaged in profit sharing. They have to be financially literate. And they're going to still be managing the content that's driving that AI, which is alive and dynamic, and it's fluid. And then there's going to be other people in regional or command and control centers that are also reviewing that. So I think it's just a different factory is the way I look at it.
So one of your themes across the board on this is it's AI. Tell me if I got it right. It's using AI to make the property more efficient, using AI to enhance the guest experience. And in terms of making the property more efficient, what you're doing is replacing many jobs that were kind of nameless and faceless, didn't really affect the guest experience. And you're taking your core group of employees and really making them super responsible.
Correct.
And you're saying you want to pay them in a way so that they have skin in the game.
That's right.
Okay, so now's the problem. We're in a really complex industry.
Yes.
It's not like I own a store and now you're telling me that I should make my GM give that person, give her some ownership in that and she'll work harder. Because I've got owners, brands who operate, brands who don't operate, brands who are franchisors and operators, brands who are only franchisors, and then I have franchisees who operate and those that don't operate, and all of them are trying to take some piece somewhere.
Right.
And now you're saying there's another piece that you got to carve out and give to your employees. So I guess the question is twofold. Is the structure of the industry problematic for what you want to do? Or maybe it's one question. Or can it really work? Like, do we have to blow up the structure, or can it work in this complicated, kind of funky structure?
I think that brands that operate and own, or companies that do, are in an ideal position to innovate when there's new technologies or when there's disruption. You see that occurring in the restaurant business. Sweetgreen and Chipotle are two such companies, and they're investing in automation, and they just talked about it this week. They're automating their kitchens, right? It's going to be a lot harder for McDonald's to do, not impossible. I don't think we need to blow up our industry. The owners need to step up, and they need to give skin in the game to the employees, and need to make it a culture to get them to be financially literate, irrespective of who the brand and the manager is. And it's in their interest to do that, and they're driving the bus in this industry. So that's where it all starts. And most of these owners are very financially sophisticated and quite capable of doing that because they develop such models, as you know, for themselves and their various capital stack, of investors and lenders. So they need to bring in the employees into that. And that's a fundamental thing that can happen irrespective of who operates it and what the brand is.
But you had said early on that hotels flip after 5.5 years. So if I'm an owner and I own numerous properties, different brands, some are managed, some I act as the franchise and then I have third-party managers, and then I'm going to flip this thing. One of my friends, or one of our more successful and well-known hotel school grads once said, "You don't make your money running hotels; you make your money selling hotels." So, does the owner have the incentive to do that sort of innovation when the owner's a real estate play, and they're going to be out of this building, that building in 5.5 years?
Absolutely. I think they have even more incentive because you've got to get that team high performing and you've got to get them aligned. And that, intangible value on your balance sheet is a premium that someone's going to pay. And you've got to prove that. So I think the fact that you got like that kind of financial constraint or, gun to your head is actually a motivator. It's a reason why to do it. And it's why private equity is so successful. They do it with companies they buy with management. And it's the same logic, just applied at the real estate, the asset level, which has not occurred in our business yet.
Which is hard to do with a REIT. Because,
it is.
Because of the tax issues.
Yeah.
Because the REIT can't get that involved. And so,
thankfully, the REITs aren't that big in our industry anymore. So
right. No, I understand that. So, but I think that's what you're kind of arguing.
Yeah.
Is that if it's going to be owner driven, it's now owner driven with really their hands and noses into the operations, which by definition is what REITs can't do.
Right.
And what you're saying private equity is really good at.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of how they made their business model.
Correct. They've just done it at a higher level, and it's bringing it down to this asset level. I think it's also something that they've done in manufacturing and in other industries where it's like, Harley Davidson. It's right down to every worker on the factory floor that's an employee owner, and it's part of the culture and what's made it succeed. I think everything you just talked about is it's great, but it's short term. You have to think long term as well. So who are these people? You're talking about 2/3 women.
Wait. Which people?
I'm talking about the workers in our industry. Okay.
Got it.
So, we did a lot of analysis on this with respect to DEI and all the great initiatives going on at various companies on this. So you're talking about, 2/3 minorities and more than 50% of the workforce, being women. And so in terms of how we make progress as an industry on this, if those people become wealthier and earn more than a living wage and get profit sharing, they are likely to become not just hotel brand owners or working for a chain, but they're likely to become owners themselves. And right now, there's this big push around DEI, around diversity of ownership and trying to increase that. That's not going to happen magically from left field overnight. It's going to happen because some, person who's a woman or a minority, was a housekeeping supervisor and got financially literate in our business, got a part of the profit sharing and was able to raise enough equity to go and get a loan and buy a hotel. And so I think it's also good for our industry long term.
So I got a couple questions that I got to keep going with. And one question is, do you foresee a time in the future when you can check in and get a room key without having to talk to someone at the front desk? And I would say that's not the future. That's the present.
That's
right?
the present, right?
Right. So there's a lot of that going on, but Jim Lapolito, he's got a question that is kind of in where we were going. In order to support an employee vested structure across all staff, are some of the profits to supply this consideration coming from an AI alternative to employee savings?
Yes, absolutely.
So explain that.
Yeah, so I think if you implement this AI model and we make this transition of the factory, right, we're talking about a 20% increase in profit margins. And that's going to free up a lot of cash. Even with increased labor costs, inflation, food costs, all the things that are happening right now. And I understand that many people are in a position where they're still paying down their loans and lenders, and it's a tight situation. So I'm not saying that it's a windfall in itself, but it's going to free up capital and cash flow.
So, and then sticking with the questions, I've got another question which is asking the adoption of apps by hotels and technology of AI. And I think what this question's asking is who's doing it? And the reason I bring this up is that about 10, 12 years ago, I was thinking, I was talking to some folks from a couple of the major brands. And the idea was about an app that would allow people to tip without, through their phone.
Right.
Not using money, because who carries cash? And the response was, we don't want our guests to have to download and get onto an app that's not our Hilton app or Marriott app or Hyatt app and so on. I don't think that's the case anymore. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not the case anymore.
So
it's not a biggest pushback. They basically gave up. Most brands have given up on their native app as a strategy.
So what you're saying? So you're saying that an app that works across brands and across owners and so on, that does the job.
Correct.
So that there's a pathway for that.
Right.
And that we're not going to have every hotel has its own app. So
Hopefully not.
oh yes. But now let's talk about you talk about we talk about franchising, and the lawyer in me looks and says, when we talk about franchisees and franchisors, that even though I'm an employment lawyer and I should be talking all the time about don't violate the joint employer doctrine and don't be liable for the slip and falls or even worse, the assaults that happen on your property. So you as a brand, stay away, don't give any advice. But I don't think you're saying that.
No, I'm saying that our system of brand management is broken right now, and that each stakeholder in our industry has a role to play in building the human capital base back in our industry and attracting talent back. We talked about the owners already, okay? What can the brands do? Well, they're collecting on average, I think it's somewhere around $800 billion of brand fees centrally. And they've got great discretion in how they use those fees, right? But they have narrowly defined them for marketing purposes and a little bit of product development support, right? Stayed away from human capital. I think that needs to evolve, and a portion of that budget needs to go into human capital solutions. What does that mean? It doesn't mean getting involved in the day-to-day recruiting or staffing or operational oversight of properties you franchise. It could mean building talent marketplaces or some kind of overarching solution, or even using your corporate website with a brand that's far more well-known than the operators or the owners to create a larger talent marketplace and job bank, and partner with other firms to build that database of employees, then offer it to your franchisees. So it's those kind of solutions that I think that the corporate offices of the brands need to look at and partner with their franchisees, just like they do with other initiatives and study, but earmark, say, 10% of these marketing fees, which I also think are largely inefficient, okay? And when you look at the whole industry and you look at, in the U.S. alone, $46 billion of taxes collected on room revenue, primarily by local markets who use it, again, for destination marketing. It's an absurd amount of money being wasted on marketing in this industry and very little being put into human capital.
And so you're looking at this franchise model and saying that our fears of joint employer, our fears of being liable for slip and falls have driven us to not focus on our capital, our human capital, and are undermining the quality of our product, of our property. And to stay within the confines of the law, there's things that you can do.
Right.
Right. I mean, it would be nice to have a new joint employer doctrine that would actually allow the really smart people that you've identified to give really good advice so that people don't get hurt. That'd be kind of nice, but our law doesn't allow that. We're almost out of time, so I'm going to give you kind of a last word with two questions, okay? And the questions are, do you believe that, and I think I know the answer, that these AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants and so on, which are replacing human-to-human interaction, result in a net loss in terms of our experiences? And along the same lines, another viewer says, where are we really going to use AI? Is it going to be in accounting, or is it going to be in talent acquisition, or is it going to be in guest services? So I guess the question is, are we using it in guest services, and is it going to negatively affect, or can we actually have a better experience?
Let's look at some other industries. I know that's difficult for hotel people sometimes. Okay, so
offense taken.
So healthcare is in a big hole. Okay, there's about 500,000, a shortage of about 500,000 people who are doctors, nurses, technicians. I think the nurse number is north of 300,000. Okay, and so what's the next frontier there? It's been $300 billion of R&D into remote diagnostics, into virtual care, telemedicine, and other technologies, right? All of which is going to improve the service level. And so it's the same logic here, that travel planning should be easier. Picking your hotel should be easier. Getting your room should be easier. Planning your event should be exponentially better than it ever was before, whether it's a birthday party or a corporate event, where you can figure out what each person wants to eat, and they should be able to get it on a big scale.
So I think what you're saying, because I got to keep the trains running, and the train's about to stop.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is that we are back to our friend D with don't become the airlines, that we're so afraid of becoming the airlines, and we've put this.
We're on our way to becoming the airlines already.
But we've put this alleged premium on human touch that we say we can actually do better with a different kind of touch.
Correct.
And then still keep the best of the human touch.
You got it.
And we're out of time. So Alex, you came from Los Angeles to Ithaca, which is not easy. So I really appreciate you coming out here and spending the time with us. I really appreciate Cornell for giving us this opportunity, this platform. And most of all, I appreciate the people who spent an hour hanging out with us, and hopefully you got as much out of it as I did. So thank you, and we hope to be doing more of these in the future.